Hello everybody, my name is Sarah and today we are going to be reading an article together about the game Tetris. So I personally really like playing games like Tetris on my phone. You can also play it on your computer. However, the game Tetris actually originally started out as an arcade game. So today we're going to learn all about the history of Tetris and how it became so famous. So first we're going to read through the entire article all at once. And then we're going to go through it one sentence at a time to make sure that you understand every single word. And then we're going to read through it one more time. Okay, are you ready? Let's start. Tetris is a video game where tiles are moved by the player to make them match with other tiles. Tiles that meet and match disappear. The requirements for matching tiles are based on color and how they fill rows. Created by Russian software engineer Alexei Pajitnov, Tetris has become one of the best-selling game franchises of all time. Pretty cool. Pajitnov joined the Russian Academy of Sciences as a researcher in 1979. Outside of his task of testing new hardware, he worked on his passion of bringing happiness to the world through computers. In 1984, Pajitnov began working on a game inspired by a childhood puzzle game that used pentominoes. He wanted to create a game with random pieces that had to be turned to fill rows. To simplify it, Pajitnov reduced the pentominoes down to 7 variants of tetrominoes. Combining tetramino with his favorite sport, tennis, Pajitnov came up with Tetris for the game's title. All right. So, really interesting stuff. I did not know any of this before. I actually thought that Tetris was an American game, which, I guess Americans, we really like to think that we invented everything, but it's not true. This game was actually invented by a Russian scientist. So, we're going to read through each sentence of this article one at a time, all right? Tetris is a video game where the tiles are moved by the player to make them match with other tiles. Tiles that meet and match disappear. The requirements for matching tiles are based on color and how they fill rows. So if we slide over here, we can see an example of the game Tetris right here. So you see all these little pieces falling from the top. When the color and the shape matches right here, the pieces disappear. And in this game, you don't want the pieces to go all the way to the top because then it's game over and you lose. So it's a pretty simple game, but I wonder what it was like to design this game. It might have been a little bit complicated. Okay, so you can see this man right here. You can guess where he's from. Russia. So created by Russian software engineer Alexei Pajitnov, Tetris has become one of the best-selling video game franchises of all time. So this guy right here invented the game Tetris. It's a lot of fun, so thank you, Mr. Alexei Pajitnov. So here I decided to bold the word franchise because I think the word franchise might be a little bit difficult. So what is a franchise exactly? So in a franchise, a business like Tetris or Subway or Pizza Hut, it gives permission for someone else to operate their business and make money off of it. But usually they have to pay for some kind of license. So back in the day, back in the old times, people would play games like Tetris at an arcade, right? So not everyone had the game on their phone or on the computer. So people like Alexei Pajitnov would franchise the game. So they would give a license, give permission to arcades to have the game in their store and let people play it for money. So I think almost everyone in the world probably has heard of the game Tetris before. So what happened? He made lots of money, lots of dollar bills. So here it says it's one of the best-selling video game franchises of all time. So that means our friend Alexei right here is very rich, probably. He made a lot of money off of this best-selling game. All right, let's move to the next sentence. Pajitnov joined the Russian Academy of Science as a researcher in 1979. outside of his task of testing new hardware, he worked on his passion of bringing happiness through computers. So we see our friend Pajitnov right here. This is the Russia Academy of Sciences. So in this building, in this institution, they do lots of research to try to figure out how to make new technology. And if we think about when this happened, 1979. So what was happening in history right at that point? Let's pause. Let's see if anyone can guess. So back in 1979, the United States and the Soviet Union, which is the old name for Russia, were in the middle of a Cold War, right? So in places like this, they were trying to develop technology to compete with each other. So people like our friend Alexei Pajitnov may have played an important role. So there's a stereotype of Russians as being kind of grouchy, but if you look at this guy's face, he looks really nice, right? So that fits really well with his passion for bringing happiness through computers. So if you're watching this video, you are using a computer of some kind, whether it be your phone or your desktop or your laptop. So personally, I think that having computers in my life makes me a lot happier because I can look things up online, I can play games, and it generally makes my life better. So you can see here that Alexei joined the Russian Academy of Sciences to do research, but his real dream was to make people happy using computers. But actually, computers back then didn't really look like this. It didn't really look like the kinds of computers that we see today. It was a little bit more like this. So we see here that it's all black and white. There's only two colors on the screen, and it's just text, no images. So back in 1979, a game like Tetris was actually really exciting and very innovative. So we have to remember the times in which this came out. Okay, let's move on to the next sentence. It's got some tricky vocabulary, but we're going to review it, so don't worry. In 1984, Pajitnov began working on a game inspired by a childhood puzzle game that used pentominoes. So this word right here is a little bit tricky, pentominoes. So an easy way to remember what this means is think of a domino. Right, so you can picture a domino in your head, right? So what is a domino exactly? It's two squares on top of each other, right? So penta right here, this means 5 in Greek, and English uses lots of Greek and Latin roots to make words. So if you just think of a domino and you see pento and you know it means 5, you can kind of guess what it means. So a pentomino is simply a shape made with 5 squares. So these are all of the different shapes that you can make using these 5 squares. So there's quite a lot of different shapes, right? There's quite a lot of different shapes. So it's a little bit complicated. So Pajitnov, when he was young, he played a game where he had to match these pentominoes together to make a puzzle. So he wanted to make a computerized version of this game. So how did it go? Let's check it out. So he wanted to create a game with random pieces that had to be turned to fill rows. So we remember earlier, we watched the video of Tetris, right? So he wanted to create that kind of game. So the random pieces that look like this would fall from the sky, and the person playing the game, you or me, we'd have to turn the shapes so that they fit together before they fall on top of each other. However, as you can see, these shapes are kind of complicated, so if we played the game with pentominoes, it would be really, really hard. So what did our friend Pajitnov do? To simplify it, Pajitnov reduced the pentominoes down to the 7 variants of tetrominoes. So tetramino, this is also a little bit of a difficult word, but it's the same exact pattern that I told you earlier. So domino, so 2 squares, domino. Pentomino 5 squares. So what do you think tetro means? If you look right here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, right? So a tetramino is simply a shape that you can make with 4 squares, just like this. So I'm very grateful that he changed it from pentamenos to tetramenos, because I think Tetris would be way too difficult if it was with all of these difficult shapes. I'm not very good at games, and this game would be even more difficult if they kept using the original shapes. So in this way, Pajitnov simplified the game. He made it more easy. He made it more simple. Okay, so this is the last sentence. So keep up your stamina, we can do this. Combining tetramino with his favorite sport, tennis, Pajitnov came up with Tetris for the game's title. So what does this mean exactly? So he took the name of these shapes, what is it called again? A tetramino, and his favorite game, which is tennis, he smushed them together and he decided to call this game Tetris. So that is how the game Tetris that we all know and love came to be. Pretty exciting. All right, so now that we've reviewed all of the sentences and the more difficult words, let's read through the article one more time. All right, are you ready? Tetris is a video game where tiles are moved by the player to make them match with other tiles. Tiles that meet and match disappear. The requirements for matching tiles are based on color and how they fill rows. Created by Russian software engineer Alexei Pajitnov, Tetris has become one of the best-selling video game franchises of all time. So, lots of money being made. Pajitnov joined the Russian Academy of Sciences as a researcher in 1979. Outside of his task of testing new hardware, he worked on his passion of bringing happiness through computers. In 1984, Pajitnov began working on a game inspired by a childhood puzzle game that used pentamenos. He wanted to create a game with random pieces that had to be turned to fill rows. To simplify it, Pajitnov reduced the pentamenos down to 7 variants of tetramenos. Combining tetramino with his favorite sport, tennis, Pajitnov came up with Tetris for the game's title. All right, so this was a really interesting article. I learned some information that I did not know before. I definitely did not know that Tetris was actually a Russian game. I feel really silly not knowing that. But the reason why I didn't know that is because actually this game Tetris was extremely popular in the United States in the 1980s. So I thought because Tetris was made during the Cold War, usually the United States would not want to buy anything from Russia. But because this game was so fun and so successful, I guess it became almost a part of American culture too. Very interesting. All right, so that's it for today's lesson. I hope that you found this article about the history of Tetris interesting, because I certainly did. And I hope that you guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, bye-bye.